As with any role that you undertake, at the end of the day, we've all got bills to pay, and we like to feel valued in the role that we're in. With that in mind, how do you tackle people who aren't happy with their pay?
Well, yes, that does happen, does it not? You have that sort of knock on the door and this individual appears and they say, have you a moment to spare? I want to have a word with you. And I must admit, whenever I hear those words, my heart sort of begins to leap a bit and I get tingles down my spine and I'm thinking, what's going to happen here? And then you say, yeah, by all means, come in and sit down. And they say, well, look, to be honest, I'm really not happy with the level of pay I've got or the level of remuneration I've got, and I think it ought to be looked at and it ought to be improved. And they may put in behind that some kind of a threat because if that's not possible, I can't afford to work for this level and I'm going to have to think about moving on or moving around. So I think, again, the first thing to understand as the manager is that you are operating under a number of constraints. So there are 5 ingredients into the level of pay an individual employee receives. So an organisation will take into account what's going on in the marketplace. In other words, what's the percentage inflation rate? What is the norm at the moment in terms of annual rises or pay generally? They will factor that into their thinking. They will factor in what is the market rate, the going market rate for the job. And they will probably, if they're responsible employers, carry out a certain number of surveys around that or be in receipt of survey details around that so they know they're keeping up to date with the market value of different jobs. There are other factors as well that an organisation will take into account. The next one being, well, what can we afford? In light of inflation rate and market values and so on, at the end of the day, they perhaps think, but as an organisation, where we are at the moment in terms of our trading and profitability, we can actually only afford to pay this. Or maybe we can't afford to give anybody a rise right now. In worst case scenario, we're actually looking for people to agree to a cut in their salaries. So there's what the company can afford. Another factor that an organisation will take into account is the internal grade level of the job. In other words, they may well have gone through some kind of a job evaluation process and they put value to each job. They will have banded jobs into categories and layered them, and therefore they'd be reluctant to have somebody in a job move out of that salary band. They don't want to start a trend, if you like, upwards. So I think the first thing to recognise is that there are 4 of those issues that you as a manager, those 4 issues you cannot control. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's worth mentioning those and explaining that. The one issue that you can control and that the individual can control is performance in the job. Because if they are performing at a higher level, they're likely to get a higher salary rise than if they do at a moderate or a low level. So it's best in these discussions to say, well, what I can do with you is work in this area, and if I can help you perform to a higher level, and you can achieve that higher level, at least that will mean a higher change or increase in your annual salary, which is good, but it will also mean that you are going to be more likely to be considered for a promotion because you're going to be hitting the top of your grade band. And if you're getting those results and you're a really good employee, then the organisation will want to keep you, and therefore your chances of moving up the organisation with a higher salary level are going to be there. So let's talk about how we can do that. Mm-hmm. I don't know how that sort of sounds to you. It may sound a bit cold and calculated, but I think it's important that people know that you can't just go to bat for them and be expected to get that extra amount of money they're looking for a year. I think it's really important that we manage those how can I put it, aspirations. One other thing I would mention is that if someone is deeply unhappy, and this is a routine and a recurring discussion, I think it's perfectly right to say, well, what evidence have you got that your job is worth so much more? I mean, what is the market rate? If you can bring me some research or some data that suggests that your job pay is so out of sync with the marketplace, what I'm prepared to do is to take that to HR and find out what their views are on that and get a response from them. But that means that you need to bring to me some evidence so that I can go to bat on your behalf. I can't guarantee what the result of that will be, but I can put it forward on your behalf and see if we can take it somewhere. So that's how I would handle it.
Thank you.
Okay.